My parents kicked me out at 16 so my older sister could move back in with her boyfriend. It's always been obvious that my parents never loved me, but it wasn't until last week when I turned 16 that I finally got some hardcore evidence. It started off with business as usual, zero celebration, zero cake, but then they actually surprised me with a gift. Except it wasn't for me. It was for them. They kicked me out of the house. The reason? My older sister, Natalie. She's basically their golden child and always has been. They've never said why, but I'm socially awkward and never had a girlfriend. Meanwhile, she was the it girl back in high school. But now she's 8 months pregnant. And on my birthday morning, my parents woke me up and told me to start packing. You see, we have 4 bedrooms and they wanted one for the newborn, one for my sister, and one for her boyfriend at my expense, of course. So I was being booted to my uncle's house. I didn't even react. And after a few minutes of silence, they promised to cover all my expenses. Until I turned 18, as long as it wasn't under their roof anymore. Natalie wasn't even home during this conversation. And I immediately knew that was intentional so she wouldn't have to witness this train wreck and feel guilty. I thought we had a civil relationship, but at that moment, I knew my family never actually cared about me, and she was no exception. And like any 16-year-old boy being told they're getting kicked out on their birthday, I felt crushed. But I knew nothing I could possibly say would make them actually love me. And that's why I spent my 16th birthday stuffing all my belongings into trash bags. They helped me pack, but honestly, I think they were just speeding up my exit. Once finished, they even drove me to my uncle's place and chatted happily the entire trip. At one point, my mom turned to my dad with a huge smile plastered on her face. Hey, now that OP's gone, we can finally order some Indian food. When we arrived, I expected some sort of goodbye hug or even a good luck. But instead, they pulled into the sidewalk and drove off before I even made it to the front door. And when my uncle opened the door, I felt even worse because he wrapped his arms around me and warmly welcomed me in. I broke down crying because the whole thing made me realize how terrible my parents actually are. I ended up opening up to him, and he seemed completely shocked by what I said and asked me to repeat everything. So I recounted the morning's events, and his friendly smile instantly transformed into an angry scowl. Without saying anything, he grabbed his phone, mentioned needing to make a call, and disappeared into another room. Suddenly, my uncle's voice erupted through the walls. This was completely out of character since he rarely raises his voice at anyone. He's generally super chill and soft-spoken. I immediately knew someone had seriously pissed him off for him to react this intensely. When he returned, his face was bright red with anger, and I discovered my parents were the source of his fury. Turns out my dad, his brother, had told him that I'd actually proposed this living arrangement myself, and I was totally cool with moving out of my childhood home to live with him instead. This explained why my uncle had agreed to take me in since he thought it was my idea. After that call, he grabbed me a pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream. He told me he was sorry for not doing something sooner. He said, my parents are the adults in the situation, and my safety and happiness should have always been their priority. I felt myself choke up and sniffle to hold back tears when he said that. They were the words I've been longing to hear ever since I was 6. And my parents told me I was worthless for the first time. But his reassurance wasn't enough for me. My parents had literally chosen to give their guest room to Natalie's boyfriend, who's like 24 with a steady job and an apartment lease. So I decided to expose my parents online and let the internet deal with them. I wasn't sure if my uncle would approve. So I waited until he went for his afternoon nap and posted what had happened without hesitation. I included everything: the favoritism, the insults, and of course, the borderline abandonment. By the time I hit post, tears were streaming down my face. I immediately turned my phone off because I was terrified of the consequences. And when I turned on my phone an hour later, I finally learned why people always say, be careful what you post online. Because it went viral, but to all the wrong people. The post had been seen by tons of relatives, and my inbox was flooded with messages from my parents and even my sister. Meanwhile, numerous family members had commented, expressing their support. Several had texted, offering help if I needed anything at all. That felt uplifting until I read my parents' messages, all filled with rage and hostility. Obviously, they were furious about what I'd shared and demanded I delete the post immediately. My dad said horrible things, even writing that he wished I'd never been born. Painful, but not surprising. My mom's messages were similarly nasty, while my sister stood out as different. She didn't say much except requesting to speak with me in person if possible. I felt completely overwhelmed by all the responses and just put my phone away again, ignoring everyone for the next couple of days. However, I did block my parents since I had zero interest in communicating with them anymore. I knew they were legally obligated to support me financially until I turned 18. And beyond that, I saw no reason to maintain contact. And that's when my uncle finally woke up from his nap. He rushed into the living room where I'd been sitting since, arriving and calmly asked if I posted something online. After showing him everything, he seemed fine with this approach. And if my dad tried reaching him in the following days, he never mentioned it to me because we carried on like nothing happened, which confirmed he supported my actions completely. That was all the validation I needed or wanted. For about a week, I had virtually no interaction with my parents. But then they suddenly appeared outside my school as I was leaving, looking absolutely livid. My friends were fully aware of the situation, so they formed a protective barrier around me so I wouldn't have to engage if I didn't want to. But they kept shouting my name until I finally responded. I marched straight up to them and declared I wanted nothing to do with them anymore, but they completely ignored that and insisted I needed to come home with them immediately. I couldn't understand why they suddenly wanted me back when they'd made it crystal clear I wasn't important to them at all. It felt like a desperate attempt to salvage their reputation among relatives. So I refused to go anywhere until they explained what was happening, trying to understand this abrupt change in attitude. They seemed simultaneously furious yet determined to bring me home. When they said they didn't want my friends overhearing, I told my buddies to step back so we could talk privately. Once my friends were out of earshot, they revealed they needed me back because I wasn't responding to their calls or texts, and they had to reconcile with me to secure their inheritance. After my post went viral in our family, my grandparents had discovered everything. My dad's parents are seriously wealthy, and they threatened him that continuing to treat me this way would cost him his inheritance. They'd stated that unless my parents reconciled with me, treated me better, and ensured I felt loved and cared for, whatever my father was supposed to inherit would go to my uncle instead since he was taking care of me without obligation. My dad couldn't afford losing this inheritance. We're talking serious money here. My parents earn decent combined incomes themselves, but honestly, in their position, I probably want that inheritance too. The difference is I would have had enough sense not to make it seem like they were doing me a favor by taking me back because this wasn't about me at all, just their own financial interests. Even then, they lacked the basic intelligence to at least pretend they genuinely wanted me home. So I told them I couldn't care less about their inheritance and walked away without listening to another word, ignoring their shouts as I left. I caught the bus back to my uncle's place and described the school confrontation, which annoyed him too. To prevent future incidents, he's contacted his attorney about changing my custody arrangement. Legally, my parents still have rights over me, and that needs changing if I'm going to permanently live with my uncle.